So I think we might just be live. Let's see.
It says live up there in the corner of my screen.
Woohoo! Yeah. Well, it's another Tuesday afternoon, evening, depending where you live. And again, apologies to my friends in the UK and Europe. We kind of had a big following, but this is really late for them. So guessing that they're not watching it live. We are so lucky today to have a bunch of really inspiring, wonderful humans who are expeditioners in the stand-up paddle world in one way or another. Some race expedition races, some have done expeditions on their own, some lead expeditions, and some do multiple things in those categories. And we'll talk about all of those today, but really great stories that I'm looking forward to hearing very much. The theme for December for me is joy, is happiness. And anything talking about travel and expeditioning, if you can pair that with paddling, yay, it makes me happy, brings a smile to my face. So I'm being a little selfish this month, and all of the talks are about things that I really love and love to hear about. So excited to talk about SUP expeditioning with these awesome people. This is what you might have seen. I did steal this picture from Norm Hahn, and I just have to throw in there that it happens to be in the magazine that arrived in my mailbox today. I didn't even realize there's an awesome article written by Norm. So if you've got your stand-up journal, check it out. And if you don't have it, you should go get one. So really quickly, my name's Kristen Thomas. I sort of have a business, I don't know what it really is, called KT Outside. I know people from all different directions and parts of SUP. Scott has been one of our members of the SUP Industry Association as a store owner down in the Keys. Norm, I met you super early, I think at races when the wonderful causes that stand up for, and movies and things that you have done have been just so awesome. But I'm also kind of a junkie in the race department too. Let's start with you, Scott. Paddle the Florida Keys is your store, but boy, for the last few years, you've been doing some really cool stuff out there. It's been so fun to watch your adventures.
Yeah, I started the store as kind of my final career of my working life, and I've been at it for about 8 years now. And it takes 5 or 6 years to get it off the ground. And now the last couple of years, I've really been able to enjoy getting out more and getting away and doing a lot more of these things that really inspire me. Not only the long distance racing, which I really love doing, but I also love camping. I'm going this weekend. I'm going for a 2-night camping trip in the Everglades, and we're going to do some off the beaten track kind of exploring. I like doing that kind of thing too. So, I'm just really, I fell in love with paddleboarding about 10 years ago. And I'm just really, I guess I'm one of these people that I'm an addictive personality. And so I spend a lot of time on my paddleboard because otherwise I'd be doing something else like drinking or smoking or something else. So this way it's healthy, and I get to go places, and I really like pushing the boundaries and seeing what I can do physically and what the board's capable of doing. And yeah, that's about it.
Name just a couple of these races, because it hasn't been that many. I know you like distance, and you live in this beautiful. Which island are you on?
I'm on Plantation Key, which is just south of Key Largo. So it's the second island down. So we're real close to Miami. It's an hour and a half to Miami, which has a huge SUP crowd, and I do a lot of racing and paddling with the Miami people. There's not too many people in the Keys that are paddling at a very high level. There's a lot of people paddling recreationally. So when I want to go, keep on my toes, I go up there. I am fortunate that I have a shop that's on the water. I live on the water, so I get a lot of chance. The opportunity for me to train is really great. And of course it's year round. So that really helps for doing some of those early spring trips, which is really, for me, the winter and spring is the best time because it's just before the shop really gets busy. So it's harder in the summertime to do things. A couple of those pictures are, let's see, the bottom left-hand corner, that's going to be the Yukon 1000, which Chip Walter from Miami and I did in 2018. It's 1,000 miles down the Yukon River, which is just a spectacular trip and event. It took us like a little bit more than 8 days, and 1,000 miles. We're doing 135 miles a day. but the river is really moving. So you have like this great current. So even when you got a headwind, you think you're not going anywhere, you're still doing 6 miles an hour, 7 miles an hour downstream. So it was fun. We covered a lot of ground on that one, and the Yukon is just, as Norm knows, he said he's done the Yukon Quest. It's just full of wildlife, and around every corner is like, every time you turn a corner, it's like another postcard. And that's me also in the Yukon in the upper right-hand corner there with my scruffy face from 2 weeks of not shaving or whatever. I don't grow a beard very well, but that's as close as I can get. And then I celebrated the completion with a bear claw. That's a black bear claw that I got right at the finish line from a person who lives there and sells stuff on the side of the highway there. So that was kind of cool. The middle picture where I'm carrying the board, that is from the Kruger Waddell 230, which is it's called the Minnesota Boundary Water Challenge. And so that's across the northern part of Minnesota. And there's like 45 portages on that one. So there's a lot of walking involved. That's one of the things that's really cool about these longer distance events. Everyone's completely different. You're still on your board, you still got your gear and all that, but everyone's got different rules and different water. The bottom right-hand corner is the Everglades Challenge. There's only been 4 SUPs complete the Everglades Challenge in 12 years that they've been trying, and I've done it 3 times now. So hoping for my 4th in March. And part of what I'm doing this weekend is kind of scouting and just getting out there in the Everglades. And then in January, we do a 1-week-long preview as well. So we'll be doing the whole Everglades. It's like a 99-mile wilderness waterway, and then we add a little on the front and back of that. We do that in like 5 days. The Everglades Challenge is 300 miles from St. Petersburg to Key Largo. So it's like paddling home for me. So that's kind of cool. The other picture is a Chattajack picture. I've done Chattajack 5 times, I think. And let's see what else. Missouri River 230 or 340 did that. That was the first long distance one I did. And I just really like doing those kind of events because you got the camaraderie of other people, the other paddlers, and it really makes a big showing for the sport when you go out there and you're like, I just did the Swanee River 230 a couple of weeks ago, and that one is a source to sea thing, and I actually beat the 2-man canoe record. So I came in 3rd overall. Nice. I did that in 48 hours, so that was kind of exciting as well. So I like doing these longer challenges because it really pushes you up against what your brain tells you can't do. And that's the biggest thing I think that people run up against when they start looking at doing these kind of things is that, first thing they say is, well, I could never do that. And of course, then that makes a big mountain to climb right there. So,
yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for breaking ground by being in the first stand-up paddler I know in a number of the races. Great stuff. And we'll get back to kind of details because I know people have already asked questions about a number of the things. Okay. Come on now. There we go. Norm. Oh my gosh, your pictures were just killing me. And again, a lot of them are in the magazine. They're magazine quality for sure. So you have been expeditioning all different lengths and you've taken trips on your own and you've guided trips and all kinds of things. Kind of describe, your business is expeditions. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on and great to be here with everybody. I'm up here in Squamish, British Columbia. I moved out west from Ontario about 20 years ago and got into the guiding industry and worked as a guide up in the Great Bear Rainforest. So that top left corner is up in the Great Bear, up in Git Gat territory. And that was in 2000. About 8 years after that, I started paddleboarding and realized that the paddleboard was going to be a pretty amazing tool for exploring the coastline. And that's probably, my biggest passion is our coastline and protecting our coastline and looking after these areas that we're paddling in. And shortly after I started paddling, which maybe Kristen was around the time with maybe the Battle of the Paddle or something like that, we might have met way back then. But I did that Stand Up for Great Bear expedition, which tried to bring some awareness to the threat of oil tankers going through the Great Bear Rainforest. Through the First Nations territories, and then a couple years later, we did a film called Stand to try and bring more awareness. And I think my business is built off my passion for the coastline and my passion for wanting to connect people to these wild places. And I, like Scott, I absolutely love to just get out and explore and paddle. and use that paddleboard for exploration and getting into these remote areas. And I've always been fascinated as to the potential of the stand-up paddleboard. And as the equipment has gotten better, you know, the range has gotten better, whether you're doing these personal races, personal expeditions, or you're taking groups through these areas. So I feel fortunate to be able to, you know, follow my passion of paddling and paddle surfing and connecting people to these wild places, and absolutely love exploring on my paddleboard.
Awesome. Thanks, Norm. Erin, my neighbor.
Hi. Good to see you as always, Kristen. Good to see and virtually meet everybody else. And yes, thank you for hosting these. It's been the other one that I've been on. It was really fun. So thank you for having us. Let's see. I've done a little bit of a mix between both guiding for my business, but also doing kind of solo journeys as well, mostly in the Western states within California, some Arizona, Nevada, little tiny bit in Mexico, which Chris and I, hopefully November, going back to Sayulita, and then a tiny bit in Europe. So I kind of have the majority of my bigger trips have been to guide, but have done, you know, a bit on Catalina, solo trip on the windward side for my 40th. I camped in the rain and kind of scouted around those more hidden secret coves. And yeah, I've done a cross section. I've never done any of the longer races like some of the other panel, which sounds absolutely thrilling and hard and exciting. So yeah, that's kind of the scoop of general scoop of my experience in expeditions.
Great. And any kind of paddler wants to explore, who gets hooked and wants something new. So it's just so fun to see, you know, from the rainforest of the north to the Everglades to, we got Catalina Island here, as well as your trips on the Colorado River. And I have been lucky enough to co-guide one of those. It was all women's camping 3-day, and with all the gear on the board and everything, which we'll talk about equipment later, and also do some scouting trips, which is always fun to scout new places, new potential places. So Luann, did we get you? I think I saw you join.
Yes, hello.
Yay.
Hey.
So Julietta and Luann, I grabbed them at the end, and I didn't realize you guys both lived on the West Coast. I called you the Atlantic SUP Girls because I know you best for that original trip, but you also had a recent, really big trip. We'll call it recent because COVID makes a year ago recent. So tell us about what you guys have done.
So Jules and I, and actually all the photos here are actually from my Mississippi trip this last year, aside from the dry suit photos, because thankfully I did not have to wear one of those on that trip.
You guys used to work at Manhattan Kayak though, right? Didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, that's where Jules and I met. We met working there. I guided there for 9 years before I just moved out to the West Coast here this summer. The COVID kind of created the perfect storm of opportunity to make the switch out west. So we met out there, and then during our time there about 6 years ago, we decided to do the East Coast. So we launched from the dock at our kayak company, at Manhattan Kayak Company, and then we paddled down the coast to Miami. Jules's mom has an apartment in Miami, so very convenient starting and stopping places, which is how we chose them. So we paddled from our dock to her mom's apartment. And
but how many stops in between? How many day trip was that?
So many. It took us 4 months exactly. We left October 12th and we landed February 12th. And we decided to do it over the winter because that's our off season at the kayaking company. We wanted to have as full of a season as we could. And we naively thought that the further south we went, the warmer it would get, and it turned out to be the absolute opposite. And we were wearing dry suits until about the middle of Florida.
Wow.
It was just an abnormally cold year. So that was fun. But so I timed the Mississippi differently. Like, you don't want to wear a dress. I'm going to do it in the summer. So I did that one. I left the end of August, and even though it was 1,000 miles longer, it took me a month less time, just because you have current on the river. So yeah, let's.
Now, I know a few people have done the Mississippi, but have any women done the whole thing like you did?
Not on a SUP. I was the first woman to do it on a paddleboard. And I got to experience many of those wonderful portages that Scott was talking about. I don't know if I would call them wonderful though. I wasn't expecting, I knew there's a handful of portages on the headwaters before it becomes a real commercial waterway that there's no locks and dams on those dams, so you have to portage around. But because of that, the Minnesota DNR maintains portage paths. I wouldn't call all of them well maintained, but they are there. But aside from that, they all have locks and dams. And so I was so excited about being able to lock through a lock, because, you know, doing the coast, you know, I use so many different kinds of water and challenges and all of these things. And so I was really excited and then I paddled on a river in Manhattan working. So I was used to kind of navigating a river and kind of what to look for. And so this was like the really big new thing that I was going to be running into on the Mississippi, and I was really excited about it. And turns out they won't let me go through. It's just Jules. Jules is home.
John, I figured those were your dogs. No.
Go say hi. And they wouldn't let me through because I wasn't contained on a paddleboard.
Interesting.
I didn't have walls, and they just, you know, they had their reasons. I don't agree with them, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, it is a whole discussion, because we're called a vessel in the United States by safety rules. So
and if we're seated or kneeling or whatever in a low position, we're just as stable, if not more, as some canoes or kayaks. So, but just because you're not contained within the vessel, they wouldn't let me lock through. So I wound up having to portage around 24 of the 27 locks and dams
that you weren't planning on.
No, and there's no way around them because they're not meant to be. So I had to haul everything up and over dikes and spillways, and it was more dangerous portaging than it would have been for me to just go through. But thankfully, the water level was high enough for the last 3 locks and dams that they didn't even close the gates behind me in the last one. They just opened it up. They're like, go. And they sent a memo ahead warning the crews that I was coming, re-emphasizing that they're not allowed to let me through. Like I was some invading force out to undermine the Army Corps of Engineers. But
that's part of the adventure, I guess, a challenging part, but I'm sure all of you have stories to tell, and we'll grab some more. Well, thank you, Luann, and we're going to talk some more about all these specifics. But we'll get one more introduction in. John is famous for many things, and he's been on expeditions, but I met him because he does races with dogs on his board, not a dog, usually multiple dogs.
Aloha, Kristen. It's really a pleasure to be joining all of these amazing people that have done a lot more crazy things than paddling with 3 dogs. But yeah, a little bit about me. It started in 2015. I tried out my first SUP, and I fell in love with the sport. And within a year, I live on a really large lake in Oklahoma, northeast Oklahoma, close to Missouri, close to Arkansas, and 1,300 miles of shoreline. So lots of room to paddle, like hundreds of coves and a lot of boat wake and things like that. So like my first year paddling, it was just amazing place to train, and I got pretty good at it fast because I'm paddling, and I'm like the only guy out there doing it, and they thought I was crazy, but it was just fun. And I decided, so yeah, I started a business. I wanted to share this with everybody. And 2016, I bought like 5 boards, or 6, I think, and started doing little SUP 101 lessons, and on the river, which I'm a mile from the river, and I'm basically a block across the street from the lake, a mile from the river. And so I started doing these little tours on the river, little 5-mile or 10-mile tours, and it was great practice too for like what I turned out to fall in love with too, which was SUP racing. Practicing for Chattajack, which is I think where we first like crossed paths, and that was 2017, I think, and maybe 2018.
And then a week later, where were we?
And
We're crazy.
A week later, we're on the beautiful Colorado River at another damn
Doing
race.
a 10-mile race.
Yeah, ADR, another damn race. Like I just got so lucky to be able to do Chattajack. I was a kind of a nonchalant cowbell ringer the first year, 2016, that I went out there. 2017, I was a volunteer. But 2016, backing up again, ADR where we met, it was my first race because I'd gone out to Chattanooga because a friend of mine in Oklahoma said, "Hey man, if you can come check out this race in Chattanooga, it's 31 miles. It's really cool." He said it might get you into racing. So I go there. I'm
What
a
a place to
spectator.
start. I'm
watching Larry Kane and people, just like amazing people. The sidelines, they're just, everybody's in good shape. I just said, I want to do this. So I looked on Paddle Guru, and the first race I found was ADR in Arizona. So I left Chattanooga, drove across country, hit ADR, which is, became a tradition. Every year I've done Chattajack and then ADR. And
so that your expedition includes a 32-mile race and a very long drive, and then another 10-mile race. That's an expedition too.
Yes. It was like 35 hours driving between.
Yeah. And then most recently you were on an expedition with Scott. I think maybe the picture walking through the trees, is that Scott in front of you?
Oh yeah, the picture, him in front of me.
I think so, yeah. So which one was that you guys did together? I remember reading.
That was, Scott mentioned it. It was called the Kruger Waddell Challenge. We're the first 2 people to ever complete that race on stand-up paddleboard. So that was just
cool.
Beyond cool. 40 portages. He said he might be right. It might be 45, but that means 45 lakes, 45 hiking between one lake to the next. And, the scenery, the nature. Scott taught me so much. I learned so much from that man. He's amazing. I learned how to use my Garmin. In fact, this year I did Chattajack. Finally, it was virtual, but it's such a special thing, this race to me. I had to go out there and do it in person. I took my dogs. My hotel room that was pet friendly didn't allow 3 dogs, so we had to car camp or just camp. So I decided we'll just pump up the ice up, and I'll do the race with the 3 dogs on board. And it was amazing. 32 miles with those guys, and we did it in like 6 hours and 2 minutes.
Well, I'm sure that's a record in and of itself, for sure. Well, thanks, John. I'm so glad that you jumped on with us. Before we go back, and I want to talk with everybody about like some general things. We need some definitions, by the way, things like portage, which I think we've used at least 10 times. But I wanted to say that there are some guiding courses out there, and I couldn't find on ACA. I know they have some, but we'll touch more about safety and guiding and all of that. But if that's something that you're interested in, the Water Skills Academy is out of England, but they have some really interesting courses. And including being a SUP adventure paddler and an expedition paddler. One's a 2-day, one's a 4-day. And just like to help you with some of the things, I'm sure you guys can answer some questions about, gear and safety and how would you go on an expedition. So, we've got a panel of groundbreakers here who've done it on their own, but it really is good to look ahead if you're going to go and do expeditions. And then one way of doing it is also we have guides here who can take you on expeditions. I also wanted to throw some shout outs. There's some amazing people. Jordan Wiley is a British guy who's, I don't know what, he's on day 40 or something. I don't know. He's one of those like you, Luann, and Jules that is going to be out for months going all the way around the UK. Really cool to follow. They've got a lot of good media around him. Cal Major, Will Schmidt did the West Coast. John, I haven't met him yet. He travels around the world and does some long ones, some short, but he's trying to just hit lots of countries. And then Bart and Casper, you probably know those names. And they did some of the really early, crossings and doing things for the first time. So there's many more too. So that's, I know not all of them, but wanted to mention them. See if I can get out of this. Oop. The only thing about screen sharing is you lose the cursor. There we go. Back out of that. Well, thank you all again, and amazing stories, huh, you guys? Oh, look. Sorry, I couldn't see your picture. You're both there now. Yay. I love it too when the grid works. So portage, who wants to explain what that is? Because I don't think that's a normal word for most people, and I think at least half of you used it. What's a portage? Expeditioners must know the word.
In the United States, we call it a portage. In Canada, they call it portage.
Portage. It is a French word, I bet. Yeah.
Basically, it's carrying all your crap across land to go from one body of water to the next. And there's two kinds of portages. There's what they call, what do they call it? Double portaging and single portaging. So single portaging, you carry all your gear at one time with your board. Double portaging, you bring your board or do 2 loads basically. And the goal, of course, if you're racing is to try to do single portaging because you don't want to do, because it's really 3 trips. You got to go there, then come back and then go again. So you're really doing 3 trips of whatever portage that you're doing. So
yeah. And interesting, there's actually Olympic paddling event, canoe marathoning, where that is part of actually the event, is that you get out of the water, run with your board and throw it back in. So there's all kinds of interesting ways of doing it, I guess, ways of even making it faster. I assume the speed, maybe if you're racing, that is important, but getting all the gear together, I just don't want to make 2 trips. I would definitely be one of those that overloaded to only have to single portage or portage. So let's talk more about expeditioning and what it takes and why it's different. So I was asking the gentleman who were on first before we went live, is there a definition of we had a panel on SUP travel, and there definitely is some overlap, but how does it qualify as an expedition to you guys? Is it like because it's overnight? Is it the distance? Is it a different mindset? Again, we've talked about many ways to enjoy an expedition, whether you're racing or you're doing it for your own, or you're doing it for a cause, or you're doing these many months all the way down the coast like you ladies did, or you're taking others on a trip. What's an expedition? Any of those? All of those?
You're packing all your gear, provisions, your tent, your sleeping bag, your stove, your headlamps, your food, dog food for one of mine. I did a 22-day one with the dogs, and so yeah, you're packing everything. I think I brought a laptop on that pack. I had 5 dry bags and one for electronics, one food, but yeah, I think that would be maybe bringing gear.
Mm-hmm. Bringing gear. I think that sounds like an excellent one. And, you can do it differently. Some of you have really been in the wilderness and totally camped. I assume going down the coast, there were stops where you didn't bring provisions for 4 months, right, ladies? 2 months? Did you really start with that? Wow. Amazing. So talk about that, about the planning. Anybody want to share? Nobody has to answer any of these, but if anybody, just about the planning. I assume that's just an essential piece of expeditioning.
that's the biggest piece for me. I spend more time planning. I probably plan, if I've not done it before, like the Everglades Challenge now is easy for me. I've done it 3 times, so I don't have to plan as much for that. But for instance, this Kruger Challenge that we did, I probably planned for 6 months for that. So I analyze the maps. I try to figure out exactly where I'm going to be. And also work on my gear lists. You know, if you're carrying everything from lake to lake, you don't want to carry any more than you have to. So try to get that gear down as light as possible. I study lightweight backpackers. They have a lot of lightweight ideas. Some of their stuff works for us, some of it doesn't. But and getting back to expeditions, to me, an expedition is anything where you push yourself a little beyond where you would normally go. So for instance, I just saw an article that was a expedition in one of the, I forget which one it was, but it was an overnight. It ended up being an overnighter thing. But for this person, that was a real push. Mm-hmm. And so for them, an overnighter is a big deal. And so that's an expedition to me. And, and then, it doesn't always have to be down the Mississippi or across the state of Missouri or whatever. But yeah, so that's kind of it. But as far as planning, that, and then like you said, taking classes on first aid and all that. I've been wilderness first aid certified, and get your gear ready for that, because that's so crucial to having a successful trip and having a delightful trip, or one that's going to end up in disaster and having to push that button and get rescued, and nobody wants to have to do that.
Cool. Any other thoughts about getting ready for expeditions? I know, Aaron, it was really enlightening to me because the weather was such a huge issue, and having to plan for potential wind. You had to change the course of the trip that you were taking. You still were able to take the trip, but you made accommodations, and it's complicated.
Yeah, no, that, it's one thing when you're planning for yourself and you're watching all, Windy, the NOAA apps, everything to make sure that it's a successful trip. But when you're guiding others and, say 20 knot upwind, upriver winds pop out of nowhere, you really, for me, I try to always have a plan B. And then sometimes, like for instance, a month and a half ago, I was supposed to take, 10 to 12 onto Catalina, including kids. And it was like 25 knot winds, 4 to 7 foot seas. And at that time it was like, okay, well, we're rescheduling, because sometimes Mother Nature just says no. So definitely the component of weather, as we all know, is a massive piece of the puzzle that like continuously has to be monitored, because things can pop up out of nowhere. So yeah, that's definitely something that's always like highest on our radar when we're getting ready to guide out in the middle of nowhere.
Norm, you really broke ground and went places that I think people hadn't gone. And again, you had a lot of the films that were made and about visiting Indigenous people and bringing awareness to different environmental issues and everything. But I assumed that you didn't, maybe some people had kayaked some of those places, but I assume people hadn't stand-up paddled in a lot of the places that you were going.
Yeah, on the one thing I like to think about with expeditions as well is just a bit of remoteness to where you're headed. And sometimes you might not be in close proximity, certainly on our coast. There's a lot of remote areas from Alaska down to Vancouver. And I think I was fortunate when I first got into stand-up paddleboarding, because I had already been guiding on our coastline for about 10 years, sea kayaking and salmon fishing. And so I think part of that planning, Scott had mentioned some of the safety side of things, and making sure that you've got that really good foundation for safety, personal safety. And then as Aaron was saying, the difference between a personal expedition and an expedition in terms of what you're guiding. Few things may change, but the foundation of safety and some of the basic gear that you're going to be bringing with you, I think is really important. And that's where I think those programs that you can get into, whether it be Paddle Canada in Canada, or the other organizations in the States, you can go and figure out how to paddle, figure out what the safety is, and just get that really good solid foundation, which I think sets you up really well for whatever you want to do really in the sport. Because at the end of the day, it's about, you want to be safe and everybody needs to come home.
Absolutely. Speaking of safety and planning, you can't always, there are surprises, and we already heard some things like a whole bunch of locks you don't get to go through that Luanda shared, but share maybe a big surprise you had somewhere along the way. Could be an animal, could be something happening that you didn't expect? Anybody want to share something unusual or a surprise that happened on one of your expeditions? Anything pop into your head?
Kristen, you know,
We,
the one
sorry.
is go ahead, girls. You go
No,
first.
no, go.
We can swap surprise stories. One for us on Black Canyon recently was that our main base camp, if you will, below Lake Mead. I've been guiding in that area for about 3 to 4 years now. So I feel really familiar, really comfortable in that 12-mile stretch of the river. And some on the panel know this area as well. I think during COVID, when it was the beginning of COVID, when it was much more quiet out there, this kind of family of skunks had inhabited base camp, right? And I had never, ever for years not seen any sign of a skunk whatsoever. So our very first night, this is a women's trip and everybody's like savvy, but I hadn't prepared the women for the potential of skunks because I had never seen them. So first night we're around the campfire and I see this giant tail inside of somebody's bag. Mind you, I told the ladies, all your dry bags always have to be zipped up. They have to be thick dry bags because the mice can get through. And these skunks took over camp every night as soon as we went to bed. Half of us were cowboy camping, so they would snuggle in between the girls' feet on their sleep. I mean, they were like cats. Luckily, they did not spray. They were very comfortable with us there, but it was they're definitely here, so we're just gonna have to coexist with them. So that was definitely okay, well, the next trip I'm doing, I'm gonna have to prepare my paddlers that, hey, we're gonna have Pepe Le Pew and his girlfriend here for the time we're here. So anyways, that's the first one that came up to mind for me.
Yeah. Luann?
We had, when you prep and everything, you kind of know that, things come up, weather comes up, animals, wildlife and stuff like that. But we had a picnic table fall on us in our tent one night, which was definitely something you don't plan for. We pulled up, we knew there was a big storm coming and we had just pulled out of Quimby, West Virginia. And there's not a whole lot going on the Intercoastal Waterway in Virginia, if you've ever been there. There's nothing there. But so we paddled, there was a campground. We paddled up to the campground was closed. But we were told that it would probably be fine for us to just kind of hang out there overnight, which we got confirmation of because the sheriff and his nephew or son pulled up in a truck in about the middle of the night to go deer hunting. So all of a sudden 2 guys are getting out of their truck with rifles and we're like, but we got, they're like, no, go ahead, you're fine. So, but we knew there was a storm coming. So there were cabins on the campground. And so they had these huge back porches. So well, we'll camp on the back porch and then we'll be sheltered. And it's oh, genius, perfect idea. Except filling up these entire back porches were these abnormally large picnic tables, unnecessarily large picnic tables. And so we're okay, well, we just leaned it up against the wall. Well, the cabins were duplexes, so there was a door connecting the 2 back porches. And so the door was closed and we leaned the picnic table up. Well, in the middle of the night, I'm listening to the storm or whatever. And then Jules was knocked out through the entire thing. Listening to the rain on the tent because it was just blowing right into the porch. So it didn't matter that we were on the porch anyway. And then all of a sudden I hear a bang and when your brain just kind of something's wrong. And I realize it's the picnic table is falling on us. So I turn and it just boom comes down. And we're under the picnic table. Jules is still passed out.
Oh, really? You slept through that? Wow. Well, I'm glad it didn't crush you.
No, it snapped the tent. Thankfully, it kind of caught it a little bit.
Maybe.
Yeah.
but it nicked my leg. I had a big old bruise on my thigh for a while. Thankfully, I was awake, and I kind of rolled out of the way. But I was like, Jules, she's like, what?
What? Don't wake me up.
She's smaller than I am, so she crawled out of the tent and she lifted the table up, and we left the door open because it was the door blowing open that pushed the table. So we just propped the picnic table back up, and we
Who
went
knew?
back to bed.
The attack of the picnic tables. That could, that's an unusual one. I'm glad it didn't hurt you guys.
Yes. So are we.
Anybody else? I think of Everglades and the true north. I think of bears and snakes and alligators and stuff. Have you guys come across any of that on your river trips?
I one time, my first trip with the dogs, that was a 200 miler. We had a water moccasin incident where the water moccasin was in a standoff with one of my dogs and on the shore, and I just packed everything up onto the board to get back on the water. And, I kind of like, I see this action. I tell my dog she get back, and so I can try to get the snake to go away. And the snake, as I kind of shoot it, it went around to the back of my board, and the leash was in the water or something. And it gets kind of around the leash and then decides it's just going to climb up on top of the board and get underneath my gear bag, and I had a doggy life jacket that I started using, but we don't really do doggy life jackets. They don't work too well. So we were bringing it. It was just kind of like a padding that I could put my gear on top of. What gets in between the doggy life jacket and the gear, and all of a sudden I'm like, and the GoPro is running. I have a GoPro with a documentary out of this. This whole thing is on tape, but I'm like scratching my head. This takes place, it's about 30 minutes of what am I gonna do to get this poisonous snake off the back of my board and us get on the road because there was a storm coming, And so anyhow, long story short, I slung the gear bag, shoot it into the water, and that
I got going.
that went away. But one other thing stands out for as surprises. Scott and I, on our trip in the Kruger Waddell, of course, when you asked that question, I just went like, man, there's hundreds. There's surprises all the time to deal with. But I had not zipped up my dry bag all the way, just one little notch, nice Yeti dry bag with all this, 60, 70 pounds of gear inside this thing. That was my life, in that bag. And it, one of the days it was cold. Scott and I were dealing with like 40 degrees, 30s, 40s. We wake up sometimes. Another one of the things I would throw in is, well, actually, this is after the fact. My clothes end up getting wet in the dry bag. I didn't know because it's in the back of me. I didn't know I'm paddling without my dry bag. My dry bag has fallen off, and it's back there about 50 yards back with a little crack in the zipper, taking on water. And my sleeping bag and some clothes got wet, and it was a real heavy bag that next couple of days. But yeah, we would try to dry our clothes out at night on a, make a clothesline. Got to throw at this. And we all, we're both drying our clothes because you just get wet. And like our clothes, we woke up in the morning and our clothes are just all frozen solid. It's 26 degrees. And, our clothes are just all different, the shapes that, I don't know if we've got some pictures of that. I think we do, but.
I think you have to be hardy souls, and it's fun that you can laugh about it later. So you're all here. So obviously you survived some of these crazy things. Well, maybe we can work stories in, but I had questions ahead of time about equipment. People are really curious about what do you use? What kind of boards, and maybe you've tried different things, and there's no right or wrong answer here, but what do you guys prefer? Anybody want to start with that one? Inflatables, hardboards?
I'll go first. I like hardboards mostly. We did inflatables in the Kruger because of the nature of hiking through the woods and dropping them on rocks. but definitely hardboards. I've tried 18 footers, 17 footers, 16 footers. I'm down to 14 footers now. I like the 14-foot length because, especially like for the Everglades Challenge, you have crosswinds. And if you have an 18 or 17 footer, it just kills you on the crosswinds. And so, yeah, it's a little slower, theoretically a little slower overall. But if you spend 4 days paddling on the right-hand side, then you want to have it be as efficient as possible. And for me, the 14-foot is the happy medium between being big enough to carry everything, and you could still, if you had to, lay down on it and catch a little nap. Nice thing about the dry bag, you throw them in the water, and then you just, you can have them tied off to your board, and then you got your whole board you can lay on. So you don't have to necessarily lay on top of your packs or whatever. For packs, I've been using, I went through Watershed first, and I went to Yetis, and now I'm into Halite bags. Those are going to be made in Norway, and they are lighter weight than the Yeti, but they're zipper as well. So I like zipper top bags because you can get into them. The problem with the Yeti bags is they're like a tube with a zipper that's not long enough. The Halite bag, the zipper goes all the way across, so you can open it up and you can actually see your gear and get your gear out. Whereas with the Yeti, you're like reaching in and trying to find stuff all the time. And I hate rummaging. I don't like to like dig around for gear. I like to have it be there and get it out and use it and put it back away. So access is crucial to me because of being, I was telling John when we started the race, it's not, you can't really change how fast you paddle. That's like a very narrow amount of change you can do, but it's all the not paddling is where you spend time if you're racing. So if you're setting up your tent and it takes an hour instead of 20 minutes or whatever, then to me, that's a wasted time. So the Halite bags, and I like camelbacks with a super long tube that I leave on the deck because I don't like wearing it on my back. If I'm paddling for 4 days or 6 days, I don't want to carry an extra 8 pounds or whatever on my back. So yeah, that's a few things that I do.
Cool. So Norm and Aaron, you guide, as well as doing your own, but so what equipment do you find when you're taking a group? Is it different?
I'll go first. Yeah, and it's so interesting, and Kristen, because you've been on multiple of these adventures now with me, including the skunk one. But I really, really love inflatables. Obviously well constructed, hardy inflatables for taking others on expedition. First of all, traveling with 10 plus boards to a destination, being able to pack down that inflatable paddleboard is essential for us, and giving them to other people to carry out. And it just, with the new models and having the dual bungees on both the tail and the nose of the board, it makes it very easy for people to get their gear secure on the board. So I'm very much a fan of inflatables. Of course, we try to go as much towards a touring racing shape. I can't call it a hull because it's an inflatable. So the nose, anybody wanting to do multi-day stuff, I would say try to get an inflatable that leans more towards the touring shape versus recreational planing shape, because at the end of the day, you want to be able to make way as best you can. So for my guiding, I'm solely inflatable, and it's worked out really well, except for Kristen, I don't think you were on that trip with Veronica and Maggie Adams from SUP Chat, but both the girls started the trip, mind you, their own boards, not my inflatables, but both of them had holes. So we had to patch before we went out, which is, if you've ever tried
Not a good way to start.
It's a pain in the butt. So by the end, Veronica's board, we had to stop and pump it back up every couple of miles. And it was to the point where I'm like, we're just going to have to roll it up. She's going to come onto my paddle board. I'm going to paddle her home. Her gear's going to go to another couple of people, so again, it's always those surprises. But by and large, inflatables have been great for expedition for us. So yeah.
How about you, Norm? You probably use both types, I would guess.
Yeah, exactly. When we first started doing the expeditions 10 years ago, and the inflatable technology hadn't developed, we were using the hardboards. So I live in Squamish. I've got to drive to the north coast, so it's a 17-hour drive up there to get to the spot. And since the inflatable technology has gotten a lot better, all of our local programs here in Squamish and most of our, at least all of our expeditions in the Great Bear, we use the inflatables just because I can put 8 of them in the back of my truck. I've got a boat as well, so it's on a boat, off a boat, picking them off the water. And so the inflatables are just so much easier, lighter, generally durable. As Aaron said, the one challenge is that if you have to do a field repair, they're pretty challenging to field repair an inflatable properly. Personally, I'm on a hardboard all the time. To me, there's no comparison, if you really want to cover distance, cover fast distance, and having the predictability. And I think when your conditions get really challenging, like bigger, open water or moving water, tidal currents, big rivers, the predictability of a hardboard definitely has an advantage over the inflatables. And something I've been, paddling on a 14-foot long touring board, which seems to work really well. I really like the flat decks because I can move my feet around on it and match what's happening with the conditions in the ocean. But where my mind's going to, I think for this year is Scott's going from 18 down to 14, and I'm looking at sort of going 14 up to 17 or 18, just to be able to handle some of the bigger ocean conditions that we have. And I think back to the Molokai race, a number of years back, it was on a 17-foot SIC board and you had a tow rudder on it. So that would help you with that, with the weather challenge or wind that you'd have on one side for hours. You can use the tow rudder to be able to still paddle on either side. So that's where I think I'm heading into a longer board just to see how that would handle. But with a tow rudder, otherwise, I think if you don't have a tow rudder, it's pretty challenged with the length of that board in weather. And then I work with Mustang products. So Mustang Survival does a pretty good job with their bags. And yeah, you definitely need some really durable gear. And it's I think some of the biggest changes we're going to see in gear is going to be moving forward to make touring more efficient. Whether that be, the lighter packs that Scott was talking about, or maybe some design changes on your board. Because right now it can be a little inefficient with all of that gear stacked on there. So I think finding some of those efficiencies and personally going as light as you can without sacrificing safety is probably where we're going to see a lot of things move. But the potential is large moving forward for these types of things.
Yeah, good points. Ladies, what did you use on your trip? Well, you've done multiple trips. The big one.
Yeah, Lou ended up using a 14 for the Mississippi because of our experience doing the coast on the 12.6s was just brutal. Because, first this was a very improvised idea. The planning was, not to repeat what Scott said, but we spent months planning the trip, looking at maps, pinpointing every marina down the way, their phone numbers, like all things, just to consider all the possibilities. But in a different sense, the expedition was very kind of pulled together as we went along. We didn't have a lot of money to get new boards or figure out gear, so we used what we had. We did get some watershed bags, and then we ended up borrowing Sea to Summit 2 bags. We ended up borrowing bungees and straps and a lot of stuff that people were just very kind to provide us with. And the only boards that we had were 12.6 by 30. So that's what we went with. We didn't have money to get new boards for the expedition. We knew for sure that the 12.6s were going to be slow, but 2 girls paddling from New York to Miami, who was going to sponsor that? It wasn't a thing that was getting attention, and we weren't really, I don't know, we were trying that hard, but nobody came and said, here, try these 14 footers. So we took what we had. We were all a little beat up already because we had been using them for years.
Part of the rental fleet.
They're part of the yeah, exactly. But we did know that they were extremely durable because those things can go through oyster reefs like nothing else. So they had that going for them. So that's why we ended up paddling those boards. But the 14-foot, well,
yeah, on the
14
Mississippi, I knew I didn't want to do that again. Because even just, and I knew I was going to have to portage, right? I didn't know I was going to have to portage as much as I did, but I knew that this was something that I was going to have to account for. So the boards, the 12.6s we used were, oh my God, what do those things weigh? 25 pounds just by themselves? 30, 35? It's the big wings, which are, I mean, they're solid,
sturdy
right?
as heck. Yeah, they have a great
Exactly.
place, but portaging would be challenging with those.
Horrible. Just they're so heavy. So I knew I wanted to be fast. I was also going to be by myself. So it's like it was my first like solo expedition. It's like, so I wanted to be as efficient as possible and learn from previous experiences. So I used the Okeanos, which is SIC's new like long distance touring board, which I agree with what's been said, is that we are going to see definitely, I mean, it's becoming much more, more people are doing it, right? People are realizing the potential of the sport and they're going further and they're seeing that, these things are possible on SUPs, which is amazing and incredible. And I think the sport is going to evolve in that direction. So this is, SIC had kind of done that. It's kind of like a step towards that direction. And I knew they were coming out with it. So I got a hold of one of the new Okeanos, and I was skeptical because the profile is a little bit different, right? It's got a really, I don't know if any of you guys have paddled it, but it's got a really slim side profile as opposed to a lot of the other kind of like touring boards like that. Exactly. You got a nice big thick rail with like a lot of secondary stability, and the nose is a little fatter. And this didn't, so I was nervous how it was going to ride loaded. But I was pleasantly surprised because it did really well, because it compensated for the loss of like the thickness in the rails and stuff by staying really wide through the nose and the tail. So it rides differently rather than a rocking in certain chop. It kind of slides a little bit. So it has a little bit of a different feel to it, but it did really well loaded up, and in kind of weird conditions. I tested it by filling a bunch of dry bags with like kettlebells and medicine balls.
What a good idea, though. Yeah.
It worked. But and then finding weird water, which thankfully in New York, in the rivers there, you can find it pretty easy. So so
interesting. And I hadn't thought about the volume in terms of all of you guys trying to be light, but also needing to carry gear. So you have to work that into the equation and see how that works. Mm-hmm. Speaking of weight, you have your 3 not so tiny dogs, John, that are on your board a lot. So what do you use?
That's well,
you use what you got. Is it a 14?
Well,
I think?
I've used what I've got. Like I started out just like they did with 12.6 on my first expedition. It was a fiberglass board, nothing fancy. 32 pounds is what it weighed. And one night we're sleeping on a ledge, and one of the dogs is sleeping on top of me or next to me, and somehow a board rolls off into the water, and we fell into the water in the middle of the night. Oh. And I put a hole like this big in the bottom of my board. So backing up to what I've learned since 2017 and now, I love the inflatable, especially the new, like a lot of people have said, the new technology is amazing. Something I learned from Scott, add some extra tie downs. Like we bought, he guided me to, you'll have to, I don't know, maybe you should put a link to the product because it's amazing. These little tie downs, add-ons. I put 4, I think, extra ones that just perfectly fit the bag, like the exact he gave me the dimensions of the bag. He let me borrow the Yeti bag. I just kind of put the tie downs about where I thought I should have the bag set in the back. And with the inflatable, especially my latest, the one I've fallen in love with that I did the Chatterjack with 3 dogs on, it's a 17.4 by 26.5, which, you know, it's just perfect because it'll hold 400 liters, or it is 400 liters. It holds all kinds of weight and gear, you know. So I had a bag on the front, bag on the back, the trip with Scott, and those 240 miles. Other than the headwinds, he's right. You know, it's a bullet, and so it's kind of also, it's got the flared nose and catches wind. There was many lakes that you just paddle one side, but as far as all around goes, it's just so nice to be able to not have to. Well, they're durable now.
Yeah.
They're a lot more durable than they were, and so yeah, I like that inflatable for the dogs, for the expeditions, and
well, different circumstances, but what great advice, all of you. There are a lot of questions about specifics, and we do have a follow-up Facebook group. So I would love to put links. I mean, I know you're not necessarily working for brands and stuff, but they're asking specifically for names, which is fine. So if you want to shout out quick your board brand names, because it's SIC. What do you use, Norm? Sprout?
Yeah, I'm with Sonova, so they've got
Sonova?
products. Yeah.
Yeah. And is yours an SIC too?
Mine, yeah. Last year I did the Everglades Challenge on the Okeanos. It's a fine board. It's an awesome board. And I do a lot of modification. I add a lot of attachment points on my boards. This year I changed it up, and I'm going with the 28-inch wide RS. So it's got actually more volume than the Okeanos, and it feels stable as heck. And I like the way the RS performs in bigger water. And so and as a dealer, you know, I have access to, you know, better cost. And then when I get ready to get rid of it, it's also, for me, it's an advertisement, but I know John's got SIC, great boards.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, sorry, one thing, Kristen, just with people, I think that's one of the biggest and toughest decisions people have to make, you know, moving into a touring or expedition type of trips, is getting the right information on boards, because not one size fits all. And I think it's really important to support your local retailers and go see guys like Scott and whoever has that expertise. Like everybody on the panel here has expertise, and that experience, it's not just given. It's a lot of work and time. And so, you know, for people to connect with those that are experienced, and if you can go to your local retailer, and, you know, talk to Scott if he's got the time, and chat about exactly what works. Because, you know, what if you're a 110-pound paddler or you're a 240-pound paddler, like, there's a big variance in boards that you're going to have to look at. And too often I see people getting into the wrong product, and it's just not the best experience for them. So, you know, the good people will ask you a lot of questions before they actually suggest what type of board you should get on. So that, if, you know, for the people that are tuning in here, that's
support specialty retail. Yeah. Yes. Small business. Yeah. And Aaron, we were on a great set of boards that I hadn't been on before on your last trip. You want to throw out that name too? I mean, they make a great series of inflatables.
Yeah. Boat, you know, they've really kind of moved away from the racing, and they're not doing much SUP surf. But as far as in their big thing is like fishing platforms, et cetera, which they're Mavericks in. But what I appreciate about them is that they're really ingenuitive on their features, and they're really well constructed. And they do have both hardboard and inflatable versions of pretty much all their boards. So, you know, aside from like more high elite level, say expedition and touring, they're a great way to go. So yeah.
And I'm going to throw out, just because there was a specific question about Red's new paddling setup, which I'm not familiar with, but I do happen to be interviewing John Hibbard, the founder of Red Paddleboard, on Thursday. So if you can ask him, or we'll ask him that question on Thursday. But yeah, all of you, if you have links to products that you've used that are useful on expeditions, would love to have those to share in that group, that discussion group. afterwards. And also, if you're willing, I guess I already sort of used your names and your contact, information that they can find you on Facebook, or if you have a website. I think, as you guys have said, I think it's a new direction. We have another wave that happened in this very strange COVID time, where at first we thought the shops were going to have to shut down, in March and April. And then suddenly there was a surge of people discovering the outdoors. So people sold out of products in almost all hard goods like bicycles and camping equipment and stand-up paddleboards. So we have a new wave of people who didn't necessarily get it at a specialty retail store. And I think, Norm, to your point, need information, need, even you guys who are, many of you, very solo and, do-it-yourselfers, community in stand-up paddling is something people are always seeking. And that's a great place to get connected to your community. So what a great community we had here. Thank you. You put a smile on my face listening to your stories. So impressed with what all of you have done, and hope everybody out there got inspired. Travel is something I missed greatly during most of this year, and hopefully we'll get out of our situation soon and be able to do more and get out there and do stuff. Thanks all for your time. Sorry I kept you a little after 5, but so appreciate you coming on and joining. Super fun. And yeah, so we'll follow up. It's kind of a long name, #SUPConnectLive and KT Outside Discussions. I think a lot of our listeners are on it already, hopefully, and I'll help you guys find it if you're not on it. But email me or text me any links that you want me to share with everyone. And this will be recorded. It goes on YouTube. It hangs around on Facebook for a while too. So you guys can go and find if there were questions in remote spots I couldn't find. But thank you all.
Kristen, can I say one thing? I just wondered if maybe we ought to throw in something on safety, just because that might help. And I know that there's some pretty smart guys in the mix. Scott, for one, he knows it all. But I mean, just
absolutely. We didn't talk about it specifically, but there were lots of mentions of different pieces of it. Anybody else want to add more? Critical piece, absolutely, to going out.
The handheld tracker device. Spot locators, good to have one of those. Keeps people connected to you on the outside. That's a nice thing when you're going out. Like even the Black Canyon, there's no signal down there. Where we were in Canada, border, no signal. That's one thing. I don't know. There's lots of other stuff, but that's a good one to probably think about, because your cell phone doesn't always work.
Yeah. No. Really good point.
Just make sure you got the basics, PFD, leash on, make sure you got the right clothing.
Yeah.
Prepared for every eventuality, especially on longer trips and stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. Love talking with you. Enjoyed it. Hope you all have a great end of the year holiday season, and thanks for being on. Take care.
Thank you, Kristen.